Hi, and welcome. So maybe you were just with me at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for yoga and meditation. Maybe not. This is a different class now. So if you don't know me, my name is Michelle Caron, and I own a business called Harmony Way in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. And it is a body, mind, spirit business. So I'm a community herbalist, and I am a Reiki master teacher, a shamanic practitioner, and I also am a fitness and yoga instructor who teaches a bunch of different classes around the area. So I'm coming to you today specifically as an herbalist and as a holistic health coach who helps people out with their nutrition and their lifestyle to give you some free tips about kitchen medicine and nutrition, okay? I did a previous video 2 weeks ago now or more, and it was also all about COVID-19 and coronavirus prevention. That is linked in the description box below for anybody that wants to see that previous, more in-depth, more herbalism-focused video. This is herbalism too, but we're going to be talking more about simple things. And just a note that herbalism is not like allopathic modern Western medicine. It is not, oh, I have this symptom, I'll take this thing. There's a lot more to it than that, and it takes a lot of study and a lot of experience to get really good at it and to have a sense of what works for people and what doesn't. We take many different factors into account, including medical history, energetic issues in the body and of the different illnesses and of specific people who we're working with, medications that they might be taking. And so you will hear me making notes throughout this presentation about certain foods and certain herbs and spices that might be in your kitchen and things to make note of with that as a precaution. I am not a medical professional. This is not a substitute for working with a medical professional. And so I strongly recommend that before you try anything new and bring anything new into your life, as far as diet, nutrition, exercise, herbs, things like that, that you check with a medical professional. And also one more thing to be aware of. Right now, we are having, along with this pandemic, an epidemic amount of people who are what we call armchair experts. So there's a ton of people on social media proclaiming, oh, if you have this, take that, it'll help. This cures coronavirus. This prevents COVID-19. First of all, to be very clear, this is a virus that we have not seen before. It is a coronavirus. It is related to other viruses that have been in humankind for a very long time, like flus and colds that we get on the regular. This is different, however. And so there is nothing that can protect you from this except to stay inside and to stay separate from people who have it. Not everyone shows symptoms of it. Some people get very, very ill. Some people don't. It is affecting everyone differently because all of our genetic makeups, all of our immune systems are totally different. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through this. Don't believe everything that you are hearing on things like social media. Don't believe anyone who is trying to sell you snake oil, right, as they call it. So if someone is trying to sell you a product, then they're probably using propaganda to sell that product. I've seen things for extreme vitamin C supplements. I've seen all kinds of homemade products showing up on places like Instagram and even on LinkedIn. And so I would say to not trust any of those sources. Do your research. Don't use Dr. Google. Don't use social media. Don't use people selling products to get your information. Ask a medical professional. Go through the CDC, the NIH, or the WHO. Those are the places that we can trust for concrete, coherent, evidence-based information about what we know so far, as well as the anecdotal evidence that's adding up. So that being said, I'm going to go over the basics first, and then I'm going to move on to some foods that we should be including, as well as things we should be avoiding, and then kitchen herbs and spices and flavors that might be good to include in our diet and lifestyle. And I've got a few show and tell items for you as well, because I like to do show and tell. And I wish I could do show and let you smell it, let you taste it. I'd have a ton of things then if this was an in-person class, but what can we do, right? We've got to adapt with the times. So the first thing is hydration. And one of the main things that people freak out about with this virus and most viruses, right? We've been taught by modern allopathic medicine, and oh my gosh, you've got a fever, you've got to take Tylenol, you've got to take Advil, whatever. The body creates a fever to help fight a virus or another illness. This is a normal, healthy thing that the body is doing. It is certainly uncomfortable to have a fever. It usually causes aches and pains and the sweats or chills and shivering can cause any number of symptoms and discomfort and general malaise, and it's hard to sleep, or you have fever dreams. Nobody likes fevers, but fevers serve a purpose as long as they don't get too high. So for adults, if you're getting a fever over, say, 102 point whatever, now it's maybe time to start taking something to help that fever. If you can stand a fever up to that temperature, though, the longer that you go just using hydration to keep that fever in check, so that's what people don't realize in modern times, is that some of the favorite ways back in the old days to keep a fever regulated was not even anything with herbs. It was to drink enough water, drink enough clear fluids, keep drinking fluids as long as you can keep them down, and to get into a tepid bath if you need to, or to use cool cloths, on larger areas of the body where you feel that heat to help cool you down. Don't have too many layers or blankets when you've got a fever. So hydration as a preventive measure, because hydration helps our immune system to just be healthy in general, and it makes sure that we have enough blood plasma. It's helpful for flushing out toxins from the body. And if the body's too busy trying to fight toxins and it's struggling to fight toxins and it's struggling with digestion, because constipation can happen when people are dehydrated, indigestion can happen when people are dehydrated. So if you're already fighting all of these things, how is your immune system going to function at 100%? It's not, right? We need our immune system at like 110% right now, fighting this and for the months to come as we continue to see this virus. So staying hydrated with good quality, not something sugary, not something with fake additives, but good old water or herbal tea, things like apple juice, if you're not diabetic and you don't have problems with sugar, but again, trying to stay away from sugar, unsweetened iced tea even, just drink lots of clear fluids, and broths will work too. I'm a big fan of just drinking lots of water during the day. And if you are drinking lots of water and your urine is mostly clear, or it's a straw yellow color, a light yellow color, then it means that you are properly hydrated. As soon as you start to feel thirsty, as soon as your urine gets darker, it means that you're dehydrated officially. And so just be aware of that as moving forward. And it also helps with aches and pains and things like gout. So just be aware that hydration is a number one important thing. And it's, I think, the most missed thing when we're looking at how to fix ourselves and how to prevent things in our kitchen. Obviously, sleep. Good quality sleep and resting when we need to rest. Resting if we feel under the weather, and not feeling guilty about resting and doing nothing, or about getting some extra shut-eye, taking a nap if we need to. And that is also key. We cannot function properly with any of our body's functions unless we are getting enough sleep and rest, and good quality sleep, where you're going through a full sleep cycle, which typically takes 4 to 5 hours for most people for one good sleep cycle. Some people it's a little more, some people it's a little less, but good quality sleep. And something I didn't talk about in my previous video really a lot was having less sugar in your diet at this time. So sugar, we know, feeds unhealthy gut bacteria and unhealthy yeast in and on the body. And so by avoiding sugar and the alcohol sugars that are the fake sugars like erythritol and those weird things that are in fake sugars, the diabetic type sugars, we don't want to have any of those things if we can help it, because they're not going to help our gut. Those are very damaging for gut health. And about 80% of our immune system is in our gut. So that's a pretty huge number. So we want to keep our gut in tip-top condition so it can digest things better, so it can pull out the nutrition that we need to keep the body strong and healthy, and so that we are able to continue to have a nice amount of energy moving forward. So low sugar or no sugar, ideally. If you need to have something sweet, have more fruit, have sweeter vegetables like winter squash, sweet potatoes, starchy vegetables, or unrefined sugars like maple syrup or honey, or sweetened things with dates or fruit concentrates. Those are better options, frankly, than having sugars. We also want to avoid refined grains and flours. So no white flour, no white bread, no white rice or anything like that. Having refined foods, basically that converts to sugar once it gets in the digestive tract. So it's not helping us either. Managing our stress, and great ways to do that are to make sure that we're resting when we need to, that we have a balanced schedule, that we are handling things as they come up rather than trying to escape from them. Doing something like gentle movement, meditation, exercise really helps to deal with that. Believe it or not, hydration and diet actually help us to deal with stress a great deal too. And eating more plants in general in our diet. So eating all the colors of the rainbow with plants, because that is where the most nutrition is. The most nutrient dense foods are going to be in plant foods. And by plant foods, I mean most foods. So fruits and vegetables, grains that are whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds. There are so many wonderful plant foods that are so high in nutrition and are naturally going to be medicinal for the body because they're super nutrient dense. And I think that all food on some level, if it's whole food and it's plant-based food, is superfood. So I'm not going to say like, oh, eat this food, it's a superfood. And there's no such thing, because all good quality, nutritious whole food is super for our bodies. And then avoiding toxins in food. So right now we're probably being exposed to more toxins in our homes if we're constantly sterilizing things and sterilizing our hands and sterilizing the house and the surfaces and things as we're bringing them into the home. So because of that, we want to try to cut down on any toxins in the diet. So we don't want to have fake sugars, like I said already, fake food colorings, additives, preservatives, things that are just yucky that we don't want to put in our body in general anyway. They're not good just anytime, but they're especially not good if we're trying to keep our immune system really strong and healthy. Okay, so moving on to foods. And at any point during this, you have questions, you can feel free to type them in to the comment box, and I will answer them to the best of my abilities. But moving on to foods that we should be eating, now that I've talked about what not to do and hydration and the basics, foods that we should be eating first and foremost are, again, very nutrient dense, higher amounts of plants and fibers. So leafy greens are a great one. Leafy greens are full. It depends on which leafy green we're talking about. So something like collard greens, it goes great in a soup. And it's one of my favorite greens. A lot of people just feed it to chickens. That makes me sad because, I mean, it's good for the chickens too, but collard greens are high in calcium and magnesium and all kinds of great things, as well as fiber, and that green color that they have, that chlorophyll that's in them, is actually good for us too. You can eat it in soups. You can eat it shredded up in salads. You can wrap something in it to eat it as a sandwich without bread if you're trying to avoid refined flours. And things like kale, spinach, arugula, which is possibly one of my absolute favorite greens other than nettles. Dandelion greens are starting to come out, and they're always available in the grocery store too. These are great nutrient dense foods, and you can get them fresh or frozen. Canned is not going to be as nutritious, and it has a lot of salt added, but in a pinch, in a situation like this, canned is better than nothing, but ideally we want to do fresh or frozen is really good. Fruits and vegetables in general, and as sweeteners too. So if you're making banana bread, how much sweetener do we really need in a banana bread if we're using blackened bananas that have been sitting out and they're getting nice and ripe? You could also add some applesauce to it to help sweeten it, or apple juice if it's completely 100% juice, or grape juice is a great sweetener. You can even use a little tinge of maple syrup, or make date paste with a blender and just dates and water, dates that have been pitted in water, and add that as your sweetener. And then you're having a really wholesome sweetener that's also very nutrient dense, and you're doing your body a favor in that. So eating different colors. So beets, things like sweet potatoes, things like onions, garlic, and greens, and carrots, and celery, and all the things that you know, whatever you like. Try to eat a variety. It's good. And then back to garlic and onions. So alliums. So by alliums, it's a family of oniony, garlicky, stinky plants. There are lots of wild versions of these plants that are very delicious. There are also lots that we can just get at the store and that we can even grow ourselves. So ginger, which is a rhizome, this is a huge piece of ginger. Smells really good. I can cut a thumb-sized piece of this off, so like a knob, say this size, and I could mince it up really finely, or I could slice it. I could make that into a tea. I could also throw that into a soup, which is one of my favorite things to do with it, or into a curry. This could even go into a smoothie. It's great. Ginger is so good with berries and greens in a smoothie. So ginger, a knob of ginger like this, it's sweet and hot and spicy and good for us and really good for our immunity and good for our respiratory tract and good for things like fevers. It's good. Ginger is an amazing, amazing plant for loads of reasons, but it's great to put with blueberries and then whatever kind of green you're into. Spinach is a pretty neutral tasting one. And something like frozen bananas. And that's super satisfying. It tastes like soft serve ice cream. It's really good. So ginger is great. And I love to put ginger in soups, but I put it in other stuff too. And you can pickle it and it'll be really good. You can cut it up and freeze it. You could grate it and freeze it. And so it even stays just like this in the fridge or on a cool countertop for a very long time. So this is something you should definitely make friends with if you're not already. And this little one here, right? So this is a variety of garlic from the grocery store. Just a simple head of garlic. There's several cloves in here. Garlic in that allium family also includes, there's also shallots, leeks, scallions, and all kinds of onions. We can eat this part, which is the root bulb of garlic, or we can eat the scapes that come off of it in the spring and early summer. These big curly green scapes happen when we're having hardneck garlic, and they're delicious and they're just as hot and spicy as garlic is. So garlic is antimicrobial, antibacterial, and has somewhat antiviral, and it's known for being very warming. So what I'm going to talk about shortly is the spices that we want to eat, and we want to focus on things that are warming for the body and to move heat out of the body. And alliums are great at that. They're really good for respiratory health and heart health. You don't want to eat too much of this, especially raw, or this, especially raw. If you are someone who's on blood thinners, you want to be really careful with that and eat those in smaller amounts. And if you're pregnant, only a gram of ginger a day. I said that in my other video too. No more than a gram a day for something like morning sickness. So garlic is really healthy to eat. I won't get into all the reasons why because I don't have time. This is not the other class that I did. This is a less in-depth class, but we're going to cover a lot more ground. Other things that are really good to eat, citrus fruits, high in vitamin C. So things like lemons and limes, especially the less sweet ones. Berries, the darker, the better. So blueberries, blackberries, huckleberries I mentioned in the last video, mulberries, currants even. If you can find them, they're not in season right now. Strawberries too, but you can find all these things frozen typically. And these are really, really good because they're high in antioxidants and they're high in vitamin C. Broccoli, surprisingly, is also very high in vitamin C and a whole bunch of other things too. So cruciferous vegetables can be really, they have a substance called sulforaphane. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And it is great for the immune system, and it's also great for heart health and in cancer prevention and a whole bunch of other things. So cruciferous veggies, which include a huge different group of foods aside from just broccoli and cauliflower. Many of our leafy greens are actually in the cruciferous vegetable family, like kale and cabbage. Apples, believe it or not, apples are really good. If you're someone who's asthmatic or you have an underlying respiratory illness like I do, apples are actually very beneficial for breathing and immunity. And that expression, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, they're not in season right now. We do have storage apples here in New England, though, that you can access. And an apple is better than no apple. But fresh organic apples with the peel on are loaded with pectin, which is really good for us, but they're also loaded with a whole bunch of different things that are good and specifically helpful for respiratory health and immunity. So good old chicken soup. If you're someone whose diet allows you to eat chicken, chicken soup doesn't have to be fancy bone broth either. Please don't spend extra money on things like that. If you've got a whole chicken and you want to make a bone broth from that, great, more power to you. But really, plain old ordinary homemade chicken soup is amazing because of the herbs that are in it, the different things that we might put into that. And there isn't as a very much antimicrobial, quality to it. And it's loaded with vegetables usually. Most chicken soup is loaded with veggies. It's also very hydrating because it's a clear broth. And even someone who's very ill and quite nauseous in some cases for a variety of reasons might be able to keep down some chicken broth. It's a to mix things up instead of just water. And vegetable soup is another great one. There are all kinds of vegetable soups, and that's my personal favorite because I'm vegan, so I just do plants. I love vegetable soup with all kinds of things in it, ginger, garlic, onion included, and whatever vegetables I have on hand. And I like to put all different colors. I go for as many different colors when I'm making a soup as I can. And that's going to give you the broadest spectrum of nutrient-dense food in your soup. And I also like to use a lot of herbs in whatever I'm cooking and spices. And again, I'm going to talk more about that very soon. One of my other favorite soups that is basically instant is miso soup. So miso is a fermented bean paste, and it is a fermented food. We don't boil it. We don't heat it. We would heat up water to almost boiling, and then we whisk it in a bowl, and you could add it to whatever you were making as an addition of something fermented when it's not going to be too hot, so it doesn't kill the live active cultures. But miso is also very tasty. It's got what I would consider like an umami savory kind of flavor. And it's a great replacement if you're someone who can't have bone broth. Adding that gives it more of a flavor like a chicken soup or a bone broth. And it also increases the nutrient density of that. Another great thing to eat and put in soups and stews and whatever you're making is mushrooms. I talked about this in more depth in the previous video about herbalism, but I'm not going to go into huge detail. I'm just going to say the best ones that you can probably get right now in the grocery store would be shiitakes. And I encourage you to get dried shiitakes or oyster mushrooms. And the reason for that, if we're doing like whatever you've got on hand, if you have some old dried shiitakes, rehydrate them and put them in a soup. Because dried shiitakes, they've done several studies about this. They tend to, if they're dried in the sun especially, develop vitamin D3. And vitamin D3 is one of the key things that we want to have in our body to fight respiratory illnesses specifically. Another thing that's really good is curries, and the hotter the better. So all those curry spices and all the yummy foods that we would have in a curry, all the good vegetables and legumes that would be in a curry are super beneficial. So I eat a lot of curry and garam masala, and you can get those spices in any grocery store. You don't have to go to a special store. You could go wherever your grocery store is and find those. And I always have both curry and garam masala and all the individual things that go into it. So there's usually turmeric and ginger in a curry. There might be actually black pepper in a curry. There's usually going to be some cumin, maybe there's all kinds of things. It depends on the style of curries. So I encourage you to eat curried food because it's good. It's hot, it's spicy, it's warming. It's got a lot of good qualities to it. And again, I'll talk more about that in a moment. Any fermented foods, so apple cider vinegar is a great food to incorporate, or balsamic vinegar, unrefined vinegars in general. If you're someone who can tolerate vinegar, if you don't have a sulfite allergy, as part of salad dressings or adding them to soups and sauces, they're really good. They taste great. And they've got a lot of live active cultures in them, which again is going to help your gut, which is going to help your immune system. Anything pickled, yogurt, miso, any kind of fermented foods. You can even ferment garlic into honey, or you can ferment garlic with salt and water. You can make fire cider like this. This is almost ready to be strained. It's been almost 4 weeks now. And typically I let fire cider sit for 4 to 6 weeks. This is a concoction. If you're curious about this, you can see my previous video, which is linked in the description box below. This is full of hot stuff, and it's all very warming and immune boosting. And we can use that as a preventive measure to keep the immune system and the respiratory tract really strong and continue to get rid of mucus in general, keep our sinuses clear and our chest nice and clear. But also it can help us to expectorate things if we are sick. So it can be very beneficial in that sense too. Seaweeds. If you're someone who does not have a major issue with your thyroid and you're not on thyroid medication, the iodine in seaweed is really beneficial, but also what people don't realize is seaweed is full of micronutrients. It doesn't matter what kind of seaweed you have, it's going to be good for you. And we have seaweed. I'm in Massachusetts. We have tons of seaweed on the East Coast here coming from Maine, from the nice cold water in Maine. We have wonderful quality seaweed, and a lot of it is harvested by small businesses that are local businesses in Maine, and they are really taking care of the ocean, and they're making sure they're getting that seaweed from a clean, pure area. So I would recommend that you eat more seaweed. You can add it to things like miso soup. You can throw it in with the broth or soup that you're making. You can sprinkle it on top of salads or rice dishes. It's really good for you, and it's good because it has a lot of little nutrients that we don't get in other places. Some other things is you want to eat foods that are going to be high in magnesium, and foods high in magnesium would be like nuts, seeds, things of that nature. Vitamin C, so things like berries, broccoli, all of those things, citrus fruits, and zinc and pumpkin seeds and many, many other seeds and nuts are great sources of zinc. So those plus vitamin D3 are really important, again, for keeping that respiratory tract really healthy and keeping the immune system humming along and doing a great job. So moving on to talk about the kitchen herbs and spices that you probably have sitting in a cabinet or on a shelf somewhere already. There are so many. So we want to focus with the herbs and spices on things that are going to be warming, as I said, about food as well. Carminative, so things that are helping digestion is what that means. Alteratives, which means they're detoxifying for the liver and maybe the kidneys too. So something like dandelions, if you get those from the store, or even just like a leafy green, especially if you're eating it raw, or a green juice or a green smoothie can be helpful for that. Things that are demulcent and mucilaginous, which means they make you have soothed mucous membranes and soothed tissues everywhere that they're touching. They're moisturizing and softening and soothing. And that's key when we're sick, especially, or when we have a digestive problem. That's also really key. And in general, soothing, warming foods and herbs, and things that are helping us to expectorate or to sweat out a fever. So that's why the hot, spicy stuff is beneficial too. And as a side bonus, a lot of the hot, spicy spices help to kill germs. And so it helps to fight those germs in the mucous membranes as we're eating them, and they're going into our mouth where we may have had germs exposed to us, in our throats where there are usually germs from breathing in. And it can help to reduce that amount of germs. And I said this in one of my previous videos already, but I'll say it again. A key thing that a lot of people don't realize is that you can have up to 6 viruses actually alive on your body at any given moment. And many of us do have several different viruses that will never actually affect us in most cases, as long as our immune systems are kept strong. So if you were exposed to somebody with a cold, with a flu, some other weird virus that maybe something that even requires vaccination. If you have a very healthy immune system and good hygiene practices, the chances of you getting sick, unless you're immune compromised or you have some kind of a weakness for what that virus likes to go after in the body, it's very unlikely that you'll get sick, unless it's gotten direct contact into a mucous membrane like your eyes, nose, mouth, places like that. But most of us are walking around and we're germ factories. We're full of bacteria, we're full of fungi, and we're full of, especially on a day like today where it's raining, there's a lot of fungi in the air. And those of you who have mold allergies like I do might be noticing that today. But we are also usually exposed to viruses everywhere we go. And there's nothing we can do about that unless we choose to live in a sterile bubble, which would not be good for the immune system either, because it's not challenging and you can develop a lot of problems because you're not challenging your immune system enough. So I'm not saying to go rub your face on somebody who's got COVID-19. I'm saying stay away from people with COVID-19 specifically, since most of us have no natural immunity to it. So if it did get on the surface of our skin, that's one that might be a problem. But for things that we have been exposed to previously and we've been sick with, we have some tolerance to, or we have a genetic predisposition because of our ancestors having a tolerance to it. Frequently we inherit that tolerance. And so we might have a virus on us that we never catch. So that's something to keep in mind. But still, it's good to practice things like hand washing, all the common sense things that everyone is telling us, right? So the kitchen herbs and spices, again, garlic, onion, and the allium family. I love leeks, and leeks are almost out here in New England. They'll be out soon. That's one of the early spring greens that comes out, and they are so mild and delicious, and they're good with things like potatoes or just in soups or stir fries or salads. They're delicious plants. And they're not as strong tasting as something like a straight up onion or garlic, but they're still beneficial. They're still really good for us. So, but the stronger the flavor of the herb or the spice or the food, the more beneficial we're probably going to find that food to be. And again, ginger is another great one to have, but ginger is a blood thinner and garlic is a blood thinner. So just keep that in mind. Another really good one that a lot of people like the taste of because it tastes sweet. So if you're trying to cut down on sweeteners, those good old apple pie, pumpkin pie type spices are actually going to make things taste sweeter without actually adding additional sweetener. So cinnamon is a really good one. Now, cinnamon, you've got to be careful if you're diabetic because it can alter your blood sugar. It can reduce blood sugar. So you've got to be really conscientious about that if you've got hypoglycemia or diabetes. Also, people who have hypothyroidism should not eat too much cinnamon. If you are hyperthyroid, then you can go ahead and load the cinnamon on because it can actually help to slow that thyroid down. But cinnamon is great. It's antimicrobial as well. A lot of these you're going to see there's a theme here. It's carminative, so it helps with digestion. It tastes good, really good, right? I put cinnamon on lots of things. I love cinnamon. I actually buy it by the pound because I love it so much. You don't want to eat it by the pound. That would be dangerous. But a little sprinkle here, a little sprinkle there is really good. It's great on things like apples or berries, just as like if you're going to eat them and you want to jazz it up, but you don't want to put a dip or something with it because you're trying to avoid sugar. It's great on baked fruit. So to make like a compote or something or a baked apple, so no sugar added. You're just having a whole food that way. Nutmeg is another one. Nutmeg actually is surprisingly nutritious. Nutmeg has B vitamins and some magnesium in it. It's actually, we don't use a lot of it. It's just, it used to be used during the colonial era in this country. It was used a ton. It was put on like everything. But nutmeg in today's world, kind of like, oh, here's your teaspoon of cinnamon or more, right? And your quarter or eighth of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Nutmeg is a good one to include. It's really nutrient dense. And it's, again, another carminative. It's all the same things as cinnamon. It's really good for us. Cloves, cardamom, also same thing. Those are all delicious, delicious spices that are probably sitting in your spice cabinet right now. Dust them off, get them out, and use them, please. Mustard and horseradish have similar compounds. So mustard helps us like ginger to sweat out a fever. Mustard also is an expectorant like ginger, and it's warming, right? It's warming. Too much mustard internally is bad. It's actually can cause us to vomit and have problems. So we don't want to have too much of it, but it's a very good thing to have a little bit on something if you're having trouble getting, you're coughing and it's not productive. If you feel something rattling around in there, it's great along with cayenne and ginger to have a bit of that, and it'll help you cough things up almost instantly. Like I said, curry spices, all the things that are in curries and garam masala are super, super beneficial for our immune systems and for our digestion as well. So I encourage you to have curries. They're good. And all the individual spices that are in the curry with a note. So turmeric in curry, right? Turmeric is very blood thinning. So if you are on a blood thinner, you want to be very cautious about your use of turmeric. And if you're having turmeric, that active ingredient of curcumin that's in it, which is anti-inflammatory as a side bonus, a lot of these are also anti-inflammatory. So they help with aches and pains and swelling and things like that in the body. You want to have black pepper along with turmeric whenever possible because it'll help you to absorb the curcumin better and it'll be more anti-inflammatory for you. And black pepper is pretty nutritious too, and it's actually got carminative, warming, expectorating qualities as well. And cayenne, which is also a big time blood thinner too. I want to be very cautious if you're including cayenne in your diet and you're on blood thinners. It is pain killing, much like ginger, and very, very antimicrobial, very, very expectorating, very, very warming. If you've ever had it and it's made your nose run and you're coughing and you get flushed in the face, that is the effect, the instant effect of cayenne. Mustard or horseradish is very much like that. If you have something, Japanese food with wasabi, which has horseradish in it, really, really spicy, nose run spicy. That's how you know it's working. And that's how powerful those kitchen foods and kitchen spices are. And some that I've mentioned before, but I'm going to mention them again. So if you're making something like a chicken soup or another dish that's not a curry, you might include some of these. So sage. If you have a sore throat, sage is the go-to soother that you already probably have either dried sage, sage leaves, and just regular good old-fashioned kitchen sage. I actually grew pineapple sage in my garden this year, and I harvested it, and it's delicious. It tastes and smells a lot like pineapple, but still has many of the medicinal qualities of your just plain old ordinary kitchen sage that you would buy at the grocery store. And it smells good, it tastes good. And even though we might associate it with like turkey or soup, it's good as just a tea. And you can put honey with it to soothe your throat as well. Rosemary, which is very, very blood thinning. And so it's also pain killing. So it's got the same thing in common with ginger and cayenne and turmeric. It's somewhat pain killing, anti-inflammatory, but also blood thinning. Now, rosemary is not the same qualities. It's not really an expectorant, but it is somewhat warming. And it's in the most of these are in the mint family that I'm about to talk about. It's in the mint family. And it is good for cognitive ability. It's good for your brain. It's good for breathing. It helps to open up. Just smelling rosemary, we can do a steam with some of these herbs that I'm talking about now, the sage, thyme, mint, things like that, as well as rosemary. And it helps to open the sinuses and to open the breathing passages. If you just throw some of that in boiling water and inhale it with a towel over your head, or just recently boiled water because you don't want to scald, right, your face. So take it off the heat, put a towel over your head, and just breathe that in. That's really helpful. We can put it in the bathtub, literally. We can eat it in food, and we can make teas out of all of this stuff. I mean, I've personally used a lot of these. And again, even though I'm not a doctor, I am a community herbalist. And these are things I use with myself and my family regularly with great, great benefits and results. So for anybody having trouble breathing and having soreness or dryness in their throat as well, sage and rosemary are going to be very beneficial for those people. Thyme, which I talk about regularly when I do presentations. Thyme is an amazing herb because it is also slightly antiviral. It's antibacterial, antimicrobial, and it's super potent. I'm personally not a huge fan of the flavor, but if you put it with things like rosemary and mint, it's better, I think. So thyme is really beneficial, very germ killing. And if you have what we're seeing with coronavirus, with COVID-19, this specific virus, is that there's a lot of dry, stuck stuff down in the lungs. There's some people get a little bit of a stuffy nose, a sniffly nose, but it's not the wet, boggy cough that most people would get with like bronchitis or with a flu. You can certainly get that wet, boggy cough once the pneumonia sets in. For the people who get the secondary infection, whether it's viral or bacterial pneumonia, when they get COVID-19, thyme could be beneficial once you have a secondary infection and to continue to heal after you're released from the hospital after that. Thyme is great at drying things up, heating things up, pushing heat out, drying things up if there's an excess of dampness in the body. And it's good for expectorating when you have that wet, boggy cough. It helps to get rid of that. Basil, mint, whether it's spearmint or peppermint or chocolate mint or whatever, pineapple mint, whatever mint you are into, because there's so many different varieties of mints. There are even wild mints that grow in my area, and those are just as beneficial, if not more so, than your standard spearmint you could get at the store or grow in a garden. Tulsi, which is an Indian form of basil, and in India there are 3 main different types of Tulsi that grow. It's called holy basil, but it's Tulsi is how it's generally referred to. So that's really good. It's a calming nervine as well. All of these are great for digestion. All of these are great for just aromatherapy purposes when we're eating them, and we're eating them, and the smells and the flavors are really good. It's helping us on multiple levels because that can help with things like stress management, and it can help with our rest, and the little micronutrients that are in these plants are going to benefit us. So something like nutmeg that's got B vitamins and magnesium, you're going to get additional benefits from that. But something like Tulsi, you might be taking it because it's helping to open up your breathing passages and declog your sinuses because it's maybe the only mint you have in the house right now. And so you could use basil, you could use mint, you could use rosemary, you could use Tulsi. They're interchangeable that way as mints on some level. But Tulsi also is a calming nervine. And mint, for some people, I find it to be somewhat stimulating and it wakes you up, just like that rosemary usually does. But for other people, it's calming. And for some people, mint helps to settle the tummy. And for other people, it comes up on them if they have GERD or other indigestion type issues. So be mindful of that. And basil is really good for you too. And it has that same kind of opening up of your breathing passages, especially if you do it raw in like a pesto. It's a great way to have it, but it's good as a tea too. And oregano, right? Oregano is another one that's probably in your cabinet. It's great added to sauces and stews and soups. It goes well with a lot of the other herbs that I've just spoken about, and it's yummy. So again, we want to focus on herbs and spices that are going to be warming, carminative, so they're good for digestion. They're alteratives, they're detoxifying, they're nutritious, nutrient-dense herbs. They're mucilaginous or demulcent. They're soothing, they're warming. Those are the kinds of foods and herbs that we want to focus on, and spices too. And then the flavors that are really good to focus on that will be helpful for the body and for the immune system. Don't be afraid of bitter foods. If you don't like bitter foods, you need to start to like bitter foods. You need to eat more of them, and you'll develop what we call a taste for them. And they've done studies about that if you are someone who can't stand bitter foods, that if you just start to eat more of them, your taste buds actually change and you start to really like them after a few days, really is when that begins. So within a few days, you could be loving, dandelion greens or another bitter type of food. And sour flavors, pungent and sour flavors, bitter flavors, again, things that are warming, that hit different parts of the mouth, and that you don't just want to have sweet and salty going on. We want to have all the flavors and warming foods, things that are going to heat up the body's temperature initially so that you're fighting germs, and things that are going to keep your temperature warm, and things that are also going to help to push warmth out of the body, which is ideally what we want, because this type of infection with COVID-19, what they're saying in Chinese medicine is that it's this kind of hot energy that it brings to the lungs, which is why it like sticks in them. And it's this dry, burning cough that a lot of people get that's not productive at all. And it hurts the throat. So something like sage would be really beneficial for that sore throat. And so if you've got it on hand again, or you've got a grocery store nearby where you can get it if you're going grocery shopping anyway. And so foods that are going to be pushing that out. So the basics, ginger, onion, garlic, those are the things to start with. Cayenne, keeping those germs at bay as much as you can, getting that stuff out, the expectorant factor with mustard, with cayenne, with whatever you've got on hand. And you don't have to use all of these. If you've taken notes, good job, you're doing great. And I'm glad that you've taken notes. But if you're not taking notes and you're just listening to this, trying to better yourself, just focus on trying to eat more of these things and incorporating them, instead of saying like you're making food tonight for dinner. Oh, gee, I've got this herb. I could throw that in with dinner. That's a really good herb for my immune system and my respiratory tract to keep me strong. And we used to use herbs all the time in society as herbs and spices. Salt was sometimes expensive and hard to come by, and certain herbs were easier to get than others. So this was something that we used in the kitchen, where medicine really started with herbal medicine for a lot of people. And we still have the ability to do that. And we can certainly use herbs in a more aggressive way too. And if you want to do that, I highly strongly recommend that you consult a well-trained herbalist or naturopathic physician, or traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, or an Ayurvedic practitioner, someone who knows about herbs. And so drinking herbal tea, drinking water, especially staying hydrated, getting plenty of sleep and rest, and eating some of these foods, and avoiding things like the toxins in foods and the really processed foods and refined foods, and avoiding sugars, things like that. Eating more healthy, nutrient-dense foods, especially plant-based foods, and all of these wonderful spices and herbs is a simple way that you can help your body to be functioning at maximum capacity, your immune system, your respiratory tract. So I don't know about you, but I really notice a difference personally. If I've eaten something that is out of character for me, that's maybe sweeter than usual, or more refined, a little bit more processed than usual, I don't feel good after I eat that. And sometimes that goes on for a couple of days. But if I'm eating lots of leafy greens and lots of fruits and vegetables and lots of nuts and seeds and beans and legumes and different colors of foods and really lots of herbs and spices, I feel really good and really energized. And so pay attention to how you're feeling. That's my other last bit of advice for you in this, is to pay really close attention to how you feel after you eat certain things. And if you are not dealing with your stress, or you are dealing with your stress, or you're not exercising, or you are, or you are not getting enough sleep, or you are, just make note of that. And you might even want to keep a journal about food and sleep and hydration so that you can kind of keep track of symptoms. And that's a really powerful tool because you'll know what your baseline is for how you normally feel if you're not normally as self-aware about symptoms and things. And it'll help you to notice more when you need to rest and when you need to boost your immune system a little bit more if you feel a little under the weather. And it'll help you to stay strong and healthy. And by taking all of these nutritious foods, it increases your ability to get good energy throughout the day and to be able to exercise more efficiently, to be able to sleep better. Everything really starts in the kitchen with nutrition. And so you have a lot more power than you realize in your kitchen with the choices for what you're choosing to put in your body or not. And loads of things are really, really good for us, and some things are really not. And so when in doubt, ask yourself, is this a whole food? Is this ginger powder, so it's a whole food? Or is this something that says like processed extracts of ginger? Then that's not a whole food, and you should choose something that looks like this instead. Same with this, right? So garlic powder if you don't have garlic, onion powder if you're out of onion, whatever you have is what you can use. And this fire cider that I showed you, I've got it over here. I showed that earlier, and I showed it in the previous video as well, is full of herbs and spices, as well as garlic and onion and ginger and a whole bunch of other things. There's powdered spices, dried spices, and not dried things that are fresh foods and herbs in it as well. So you can use what you have to make infused vinegars and infused oils. Something like an oregano-based olive oil is really good for dipping bread or putting on potatoes. Rosemary is wonderful to put on things like potatoes and baked vegetables and broiled vegetables and roasted things in the oven. There's all different ways that you can get this stuff into your body is what I'm saying. And I think that really learning to love all these different flavors in your food as soon as possible would be really good for you. And again, being mindful of if you have any medical conditions, consulting with a medical professional or at least someone who's an herbalist who would know what not to have if you are on certain meds or you have certain medical conditions, how those things interact. So if you have any questions after this, you can certainly leave them in the comment box that's below this, or you can ask me. I do not give personal herbal advice to people based on questions and them contacting me. I don't give people herbal advice that's on a personal basis unless I have a full consultation and medical history with them and I know what's going on from start to finish with them. So please don't write to me and say, what do I take for this? I'm not gonna tell you what to take if you have a headache or a stomach ache or whatever, because I don't know what your medical history is and I can't safely make any recommendations. So be aware of that too, please. But most of these herbs and spices are very safe unless you're on certain medications that were previously mentioned or you have certain conditions. So someone, for example, who's pregnant shouldn't eat a ton of rosemary because it's got what we call amenagogue properties. It's a blood thinner and it can actually bring on menses and cause miscarriage early in pregnancy. So we would only have, for people who are pregnant, for people who are on blood thinners, we would only have a small amount as such that we would find in a meal, right? So you're not going to have like a big cup of rosemary tea or a big cup of ginger tea if you're pregnant or if you're on blood thinners, but a sprinkle of that on your meal is not probably going to do any damage, okay? So on that note, I hope this is helpful. Very simple advice. Again, if you can incorporate just some more of this stuff into your life and eliminate some of the stuff that's not helping you, you're going to be in great shape and it'll help keep your immune system healthy and your respiratory tract healthy so that if you are exposed to this virus of COVID-19, that you are hopefully in that 80% of people who are sick for a time and then recover successfully, regardless of what your age or underlying medical conditions are. Wouldn't that be good? So the more we can get our immune system and our respiratory system healthy and strong, flexing its muscles, and keep that as a habit for ourselves, with all these healthy new habits we can start, the better off we're going to be, the stronger we're going to be going into it if we do come down with this virus at some point, but we'll also be able to avoid viruses in general and bacterial infections in general if our immune system and our body is working better and more efficiently. Okay, so stay safe, stay healthy. Please don't hesitate to write with questions. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, a peaceful rest of your day and weekend. So enjoy all the different flavors that are out there for foods and herbs and spices in your kitchen. Okay, take care. Thanks for joining me.